Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants Hangout. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I will be your host for today. Anybody who's been following along the last 2.5 weeks knows that we've been diving deep into the issue of ocean plastics. We've been looking at why it's a problem, how it's happening. We've been looking at solutions, talking to lots of scientists, artists, explorers, adventurers, conservationists, people from different organizations, all people working together to try and solve this really big problem. So continuing on, today we are going to be joined by Ruth Robuck. Anna is an NOAA Nancy Foster Scholar affiliated with the Stellwagen Bank National Marine Sanctuary. She's pursuing a PhD in chemical oceanography at the University of Rhode Island Graduate School of Oceanography. Her research examines new contaminants like water repellent compounds compared to legacy pollutants like flame retardants in seabird tissue and ocean water to better figure out how seabirds are accumulating these pollutants. She's also the managing editor of oceanbites.org and constantly seeks to spread awareness about plastic and chemical pollution in the oceans. So Anna, it's so great to have you joining us today. We're looking forward to learning a little bit more about you and your research.
Hi, everyone. I am very excited to be with you today. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so we can get started. All right, let me pull up my little slides I have to show you today. Cool. All right, so Joe, can you see slides okay? All right, well, we'll go ahead. So my name is Anna. I am a PhD student at the University of Rhode Island. Rhode Island is a tiny little state on the US East Coast. I know we have classrooms from all over the place here today with us. And I am a student like most of you. Oh, stop. No, come here. Here we go. So I am a student like most of you. And this means that I am working hard to better figure out some questions about where plastics are in the environment in the Gulf of Maine, this area up off the east coast of the United States, off the coast of Maine and Massachusetts. I work on seabirds, and seabirds are a really interesting study subject. And a lot of you may have seen pictures of birds that look like this. And this is an albatross chick, and this chick died from eating too much plastic. Its parents got confused, grabbed a lot of plastic out of the ocean, and fed it to the chick. Its stomach filled up so much that it wasn't able to eat good food anymore, and so it starved essentially. But there are lots of other ways for plastics to impact seabirds, and so that's really what I focus on. I try to figure out how many plastics are in the birds from the US East Coast and where they're coming from. And my study species is this group of birds, or the species of birds, called great shearwaters. And the shearwaters are pictured here. These birds live in the Gulf of Maine off of the coast of Massachusetts during our summertime. And so they come here, they eat this fish called sand lance, a very small, skinny fish, and they fatten up. And then when it comes, actually right around now, they head south. They go into the South Atlantic and they feed on small fish near the coast of Antarctica. And they breed and produce eggs on a group of islands called the Tristan da Cunha Island Group. And these islands are the most remote islands on the face of the planet. They are smack dab in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean between Africa and South America. So these birds move or travel a really long way each year, up to 20,000 kilometers in a given year. And so how healthy they are is really important to understand if they're able to conduct this migration or if there's issues that are stressing them out and compromising their ability to do this migration. And so plastics play into this whole equation because plastics are a really significant stressor of seabirds. And So we care about plastics and seabirds because seabirds provide us a lot of information about the ocean environment. Seabirds, like us, are global citizens. They live all over the globe, and so we get this big picture of where plastics or chemicals could be by looking at seabirds. They also live for a really long time, and so they have time to grow and develop and accumulate plastics or chemicals, which makes them that easier to measure. Seabirds are also, as I mentioned, sensitive to their environment and their food. So if there's not a lot of fish in an area and it's not a healthy food web, the seabirds are going to reflect that, and the seabirds aren't going to be very healthy. In terms of plastic, if there is a lot of plastic in an area, the seabirds are going to reflect that in their stomach contents. And as Joe mentioned, I am a Nancy Foster Scholar in Stellwagen Bank. Stellwagen Bank is one of the U.S. National Marine Sanctuary. It's situated off the coast of Massachusetts between Cape Ann and Cape Cod, and it is a really special area in terms of coastal environments. There is this bank on the seafloor that makes it very shallow in an area that would otherwise be really deep. And this shallow area means that a lot of things like to call that area home, and it's a very productive area. So there's a lot of phytoplankton, zooplankton, fish, sharks, whales, seabirds. And so it's an important area to monitor and protect because so many animals call this area a buffet table, if you will. They really like to eat here and live here. The Stellwagen Bank National Marine Sanctuary maintains a great shearwater research program, and I'm part of that team. The other part of the team really focuses on satellite tagging birds. If you're interested in this, we have a Twitter account at Track Seabirds where we can, where you can see where the birds are, and these are some examples of where our satellite tagged birds go over the course of a summer. We tag them in July, and then the tags stay on until about November, when the tags typically fall off. But then we get to figure out where the birds are eating and hanging out in the Gulf of Maine. And this is important because this tells us, again, where the fish are or where they may be accumulating plastics. And my work comes in, again, with this plastics. And so shearwaters from this area have previously been looked at to see if they have been eating plastics. And so data from the early 2000s, 2005 and 2008, found that 71% of the shearwaters that were assessed contained plastic. And that's a lot of birds. They mostly had user plastics, so stuff that like packaging materials and bottle caps, along with hard fragments. And so this is concerning because we want to know where this is coming from. Also concerning because some of our best estimates suggest that plastic production is going to double over the next 20 years and then quadruple by 2050. And so I mentioned that these seabirds are good indicators of the marine environment. And so as plastic production increases and more plastic gets into the ocean, this means more and more plastic can get into seabirds. And right now, we know that plastic can directly harm seabirds by essentially choking them and filling up their stomach contents, but we're not exactly sure how this translates to their population health or what that means in the big picture. And so we want to better understand how many of them are eating plastic so we can try to figure out how it's going to impact seabirds long term. That is where my work comes in. At this point, I am going to stop my screen share. No, go back. Okay. And move to the camera again. Cool. Can everyone see me?
Try pushing the green button again, Anna. It didn't work. There you go.
Good.
We gotcha.
Awesome. So I am in my laboratory, and at this point, I'm going to show you how I get data about plastics in seabirds. And so this will involve, I have a seabird here that I'm going to show you. There's no squirting blood. There's nothing too gory. I'm going to show you the seabird and then show you its stomach and where it accumulates plastic so that you can better understand how it gets that. If you are maybe squeamish or a little nervous about, you can just close your eyes and I'll tell you when the dead bird is out of view if you're concerned about that. So let me get turned around here. Okay, cool. Everyone can see me?
We can see, yep.
Great. All right, so I'm in a lab, so I always have to be safe. I wear lab glasses, a lab coat, and gloves. And I already opened up this bird. This is a sooty shearwater. It's kind of like the cousin of my study species. And I already opened up this bird to make sure it was healthy. Birds can carry different infections and diseases, and so you don't really want to work with a bird that has a bunch of fungus growing in or anything like that. You would need more like safety gear to make sure that you're not breathing in anything harmful. So I've already opened up this bird, and the first thing that you look for when you're checking out a bird for plastic is how much fat it is, how healthy it is, what its body condition looks like. So I'm going to give you a quick peek at that. On the sides of the bird, there's this white stuff, and that is all of its fat. We call that subcutaneous fat. And because these birds are coming to my study area, the Gulf of Maine, to fatten up, we want to see that fat on the birds. That's really important because that means that they're getting a lot of nutrition from the area. After that, I'm going to go ahead and take out its stomach. And I don't want to gross anyone out too much, but you might be able to see a little bit. The heart and the liver kind of rest on top of the stomach. And so we take those out too and set those to the side. Those go over here. And now we're just left inside with the bird's GI tract. This is what that looks like. It's just essentially a long tube that goes along the back of the bird and contains everything that they're eating over the short and the long term. And let me take this out. All right. And so this, when you're looking at a bird, their internal organs are connected in a lot of different ways. So it takes a little poking and prodding to kind of get things out that you want out. All right. Here we go. All right, and here we have a bird stomach. This is what it looks like. It's really slimy and has a lot of membrane material in it. And so I showed you at the beginning how the seabird had a ton of plastic. That baby chick had all that plastic in its stomach. And this is possible because a certain family of seabirds, they have a two-part stomach. And so this part at the top is called the proventriculus. And it's really slimy, so I gotta hold it with something less slippery than my fingers. And it is really, I'm gonna open it up so that we can take a look inside here. There we go. And so it's just like a big stretchy sack, essentially. And so birds are able to fit so much plastic in their stomach because this sac, this proventriculus at the top, can stretch out a lot. It's so slippery. Here we go. And so, as you can see, I can fit a lot. I can stretch that out a lot. And so they're able to squeeze up to 8% of their body weight in plastic into this sac at the top of their stomach. And some seabirds are able to just throw up and get a lot of the plastic out that's in this top portion of their stomach. But the proceliform seabirds, that's again a certain type of seabird, they're not able to do that because they have a two-part stomach. I'm going to show you the bottom of that right now. And so at the bottom, they have this tiny organ. It's called a ventriculus, or you might call it like a gizzard. And so this, I'm covering up the top part with my hand. But this tiny portion here is where they store the hard parts from their prey. And in this particular type of seabird, this is where they accumulate a lot of plastic, and they can't throw this back up. And so it can pass out sometimes, but a lot of times it gets broken down into smaller and smaller pieces. And so that's why we're concerned about this, because not all seabirds can readily get rid of all the plastic that they have in them. And so I'm going to cut this open for us to take a look at, see what is in here. And so as we're cutting this open, I have a sample plate ready to go. And open it up. Oh, there's some plastic. We open this up, and the inside of this is kind of yellow. And I'm going to take some water and squirt out anything that's in there into the dish so that I can go back and look at it. Hopefully everyone can see that. So I have this sample dish, and I just squirt the water into this gizzard organ and squeeze everything out. And so the inside of this organ is still really, really tiny. But so far I see 2 pieces that I know are plastic. And when I'm doing this for analysis, I do it maybe a little bit less fast, a little bit more carefully. But get everything out of there. And then we're left with a sample that has a bunch of water in it. And right now I can see a piece of plastic. This looks, I'm not exactly sure which type it is, but I can see that it's kind of floating. And so when I'm looking at these samples, a lot of the best way to figure out what's plastic and what's not, oh, sorry, my head's cut off. A lot of the way to figure out what's plastic and what's not is by seeing what floats and what doesn't. From there, I'll take this, oops, and I have, take off my switch out for a clean glove, and I take this and I'll run it through some kind of mesh or a sieve. And I'll do this because I want to get out the really tiny stuff. I'm not really able to look for the very tiniest portions of plastic. To look for those, you have to have a lab that doesn't have really any plastic in it at all, and that's not my lab. And so if I try to look for those, my samples can get really contaminated by my environment. So I just look for things that are bigger than 1 millimeter up to 5 millimeters. And I pick out these size meshes to look for that appropriately. And then I'll take it and I'll either put it on a filter. This is a filter apparatus where I'll dump this watery sample into that, and then I'll filter the water out. Sometimes I'll put some very basic solutions on it and digest all of the, in here there's some squid beaks and some fish bones, and so I'll digest all of that and put it onto this filter and then look at it under a microscope. And I have a sample that I previously kind of dried out already that I thought I could try to show you a little bit more closely. So this sample was from my study species, and actually I'm going to come back over here so I can be closer to you all. Okay, hi everyone. So I have this sample that is from my study species, and this particular bird had 12 pieces of plastic in that organ that I just showed you, that organ that's about the size of maybe a US $50 or dollar. And so these plastics This is the portion of a bottle cap. Hopefully you can see that. I don't know how good my computer camera is. So a lot of the birds, I find they have portions of bottle caps in them, and you can tell that they're bottle caps because if you look really closely, you can see the striations on the bottle itself, like where it twists onto the bottle. This one also has a few squid beaks in it, and so that's good. That means it was eating some of its natural prey. This is what a squid beak looks like. And when I count these and figure out how many squid it had eaten, I only look for the top of the squid beak because the squid beaks have two portions to it. And so I look for the part that's curved and rounded and not the portion that's flatter. And so that way I can get a good estimate of how many squid this bird ate. What else? There's also kind of just a miscellaneous plastic bit. I'm not sure what this is. It probably is from some kind of packaging material, it looks like, because this also was floating. A lot of the material we find is polypropylene or polyethylene. Those are two types of plastic. And those are the ones that are easiest for me to identify. After I look for things for looking at their density or if they're floating, I can go back and do some chemical tests to figure out what kind of plastic they are. But I haven't done that yet. I guess with that, I'd love to hear some questions from the classrooms and stop talking for a little bit.
All right, fair enough, Anna. You deserve a little break, but the questions are going to come and they're going to want answers, so you got to be ready. Well, first of all, thank you so much. That was really interesting and definitely a first for Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. We've had a lionfish dissection, but not a seabird dissection, so that was really neat, and I think it really illustrates the problem quite well. Is on any given day you can look inside a seabird's stomach and reliably find plastics in it. So thank you very much for sharing that with us. So let's meet our first classroom. Let's see. Let's go to Bristol, Connecticut to start. We've got a group of students with Mrs. Edrosny. Let me turn their microphone on. How are we doing, Bristol?
Good. How are you doing?
All right. Who's got a question for Anna?
How many types of seabirds are there?
You hear that? How many types of seabirds are there?
There are a lot. I believe there are somewhere in the range of 200 different kinds. I'm not exactly positive of the exact number, but I think it's 256. But don't quote me. But there are a number of them, and they all rely on living at sea, and so they're really intimately linked to the health of the ocean.
All right, we'll come back your way shortly for a follow-up question, but let's go to Mr. Jorgensen's group. They are joining us from Sherwood Park, Alberta, so here in Canada, grade 6s. Let me turn their microphone on. How's it going, Alberta?
Good.
All right, we've got a question.
Eric? Yeah, you can just talk into the mic, buddy.
The more birds that you dissect, do you get more and more plastic or less plastic?
That's a great question. So unfortunately, I'm finding more and more plastic the more birds I cut up. I've cut up about 120 birds so far, and I'd say I find plastic in about 90% of them. And so I showed you that estimate from a couple years ago, and so it looks like more and more birds in my area or more and more of my species, are eating more plastic.
So Anna, just to build on that question, the birds that you're looking at, have you come across any that look like plastic was the cause of death?
Yes, actually just one. There was one that it washed up on the beach, and so I get a lot of these birds from fishing nets, and so they were still flying around before they drowned in the net. But occasionally I'll get a bird that washes up on shore, and I did have one bird that washed up that was the top portion of the stomach that I showed you, that was filled with plastic, and that is unusual because typically I find them and just the bottom portion has plastic in it. And so I do think that bird died from plastic ingestion.
All right. Well, great question from Alberta. In Niagara Falls, we have Mr. Taylor's grade 10s joining us. Let me turn their microphone on. How we doing, Niagara Falls?
Hi.
All right, we have a good question here, actually. Travis, go ahead.
Are you able to know if the plastics in the birds were consumed where you were dissecting them, or if they were consumed over where the birds came from?
That is a great question. And with that, I have to say we're working on it. Because these particular birds, we satellite tag them. And so we know where they're feeding a lot. And most of the birds I have are young birds. And so they stick around their feeding grounds more than they migrate south to breed. And so we have some statistical models that tell us how long they're hanging out in this area that we are getting them from. And so it's an informed estimate to say how many plastics they're getting from our area. We also have some chemical tests lined up, and we can better determine how long the plastic had been in the water or what type of plastic it was. But again, I haven't done that yet, so to be continued. But that's a really excellent question. Joe, hello? Hi?
Sorry, got too excited. I didn't turn my microphone back on. We've got an online question. Mrs. Lefford's class is joining us. And so just shoot me a message too and let me know where you're watching from. But they're wondering, how many birds do you tag each year?
So it varies. The tags are really expensive. So we tag between 10 to 20 birds per year. The data that I showed in that one slide, that was from 20 tagged birds, or excuse me, that's from more than that. That was from a number of years put together. This year we tagged 10, last year we tagged 20. It depends on how much money we have for the tags. Hi.
All right, we just had another class jump in and join us. This is, I believe, our class joining us from Virginia Beach. Let me double check. Yeah, Virginia Beach, some high school students just came in and joined us. So I'm gonna turn their microphone on and let them say hi. How we doing, boys and girls?
Hi. How's it going?
I'm glad you joined us. We just did a really cool dissection of the seabird and its stomach, and we found plastic in it, which I don't think Anna found very surprising. I think lots of the samples have plastics, but I'll swing back to you guys in a minute. And if you have any questions about seabirds and plastics in the ocean, Anna is your person to talk to. All right, so Anna, let's go back to our group in Connecticut and see if they have another question.
Stand up. Nice and loud.
Is there anything we could do to help the birds?
Yeah, there's a lot that we can do. So something that's really exciting about talking about plastic pollution is there's so many things that we can do as consumers and citizens to work on this question. And I think my number one advice is refuse, reduce, recycle, and reuse. And I'm sure you've heard that in school, but as I think I mentioned, the seabirds eat more plastic as more plastic gets into the ocean. And so the plastic is created because we're using a lot of it. And so if we use less plastic, there's going to be less produced. And this will keep more plastic out of the ocean. And this will help reduce the amount of plastic that seabirds eat. If you can, try not to use, make sure when you recycle, you always screw on your bottle caps onto the bottle that you're recycling. These, the bottle caps, as I showed you in this little sample, that's something I see a lot of because they are really light and they can get easily washed out of recycling. And so always screw on your bottle caps, that's important. Recycle, make sure that you're recycling. Try to avoid plastic bags in grocery stores, cut down on the number of straws you might be using. And if you're given the option between buying something that has plastic packaging and something that doesn't, take the one without the plastic. That's really important. Great question. Thank you so much.
All right. Great points, Anna. I think we're so used to the 3 R's that we don't often think about the refuse aspect. And a really good analogy has been used a few times this week is it's like a bathtub. If your water was running and your bathtub was overflowing, would you just mop the water as it came out of the bathtub, or would you turn off the tap? And I think that's going to be the biggest thing going forward. If we're refusing, our decisions are really going to influence what industry is making for us. If we're not buying it, they're not going to make it. So, all right. Anna, can you quickly share that sample again with the contents, just so our class from Virginia Beach just joined us, thinking an idea for what you see when you when you're looking into a stomach.
Yeah, absolutely. So Virginia Beach, I can show this really quick. I have a seabird stomach. This is what it looks like. And this particular bird that I work on has a 2-part stomach. I don't have gloves on, so I can't touch it, but the top portion that is in the tweezers, that is their gizzard. It's called a ventriculus. The bottom portion is their proventriculus. This is a really stretchy portion. They can throw up plastic that's in that stretchy portion. They can't throw up plastic that's in the gizzard portion of their stomach. And so my work, I look at what's in that the top small part. It's about the size of a dollar coin. And I find stuff like this. And so I don't know how well you can see, but this particular bird had 12 pieces of plastic in it. And we see a lot of bottle cap pieces. This is kind of just like a small, ooh, I dropped it. Ah, well, I'll have to find that. There's like just kind of like small bits of consumer plastics in here. And they're also, here we go. They also were eating some squid, so I see a lot of these, fish bones and that sort of thing as well.
All right.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing again. And we will jump to Virginia Beach now and see if they have a question for you.
We got a question.
What do you think? Don't be shy.
Can you hear us?
We can hear you. I've got your mic on.
Oh yeah.
So anything's fair game. Plastics in the ocean, seabirds ingesting plastics.
What can we do to help prevent plastic from being distributed throughout the ocean? So
don't throw it in there.
No, I'm sure there's something more scientific than that.
Honestly, I think the basic refuse, reduce, recycle, reuse kind of thing. I had some slides at the beginning that seabirds essentially track what we put into the ocean. And so there's a bunch of studies that have been done showing as we change plastic production, more seabirds get more plastic. And so if you have the opportunity to avoid a plastic product, avoid it, because the less plastic we use, the less that's going to be produced. The less that's produced, the less that gets into the ocean, and the less that seabirds have the opportunity to eat. And so I think knowing your role as an informed consumer is really important, particularly for all of you. You're kind of at an age where you're going to be making more consumer choices. Make those choices wisely. You have a lot of power, probably more than you think. And so I encourage you to just, take that seriously.
Yeah. And to add to that, one thing we've been learning this week is that your recycling systems are different everywhere. So depending on where you live, plastic might say recyclable, but it's not recyclable in your area. And there's certain types, like the recyclable, if you look on the bottom of something, they have different numbers. So the recycle symbol with the 1 or a 2 or a 5. And in many cases, things like a 5 on the bottom, you might see that in like a grape container, a grape wrapper. Those aren't really recyclable without really, really specialty facilities. So part of it is just realizing that just because something says recyclable doesn't actually mean it's recyclable or even recyclable in your area. So that's worth looking into, becoming that informed consumer. So let's jump to Alberta, back to Mr. Jorgensen's group.
Do you want to pick something else?
What?
Anybody? Yeah, you can just talk to everybody.
After all, like out of all the birds that you find, are most of them like healthy?
It depends on the year. So I look at birds over a wide time frame. I have birds from 2010 to right now, and it really depends on the year. 2017, for some reason, was a really bad year for my study species. So when I showed you the bird, I showed you that white layer of fat. And most of the birds from 2017 didn't have any of that fat. They were really skinny birds. And I haven't statistically worked it out yet, but I think that they might have more plastic in them because they were hungrier. They were more desperate and probably eating more plastic in their environment because they couldn't really find the fish and squid that they were looking for. But that's a great question. Thank you so much.
All right, let's visit Niagara Falls one more time and see if they have another question.
Yell from the side.
All right, Ashley, go ahead.
Hello. I'd like to ask, how do you get your specimens?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear you.
How do you get your specimens?
So great question. I work with NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. And so as that, I am a scholar with them and I have access to some of their programs. Here in Rhode Island and Massachusetts, we have a Northeast Fisheries Science Center that's run by NOAA. And this group puts observers out on fishing boats to see what's being caught. And the observers on the boats bring in any seabirds that are caught in nets. And so there's a lot of fishermen put nets out and leave them there. And seabirds, they get caught in the nets and they drown as they're kind of looking for fish, or they're trying to get at fish that get caught in the nets. And so I get all of those drowned seabirds from the Northeast Fisheries Science Center. And so they're it's a great sample because they're kind of healthy up until the moment, or they're hopefully healthy up until the moment where they get caught and drown. It's not like something that died and then washed ashore later. I do get some of those that get washed ashore because they die at sea. But most of my samples, about 900 of them, come from these nets. Great question.
All right, and then the class who sent in that question online, they're actually, Mrs. Lefford's class is in Topeka, Kansas. So thanks for joining us. And then they're wondering, how big are the chicks? And do you ever have an opportunity to look at them?
Oh, that's a good question. The chicks are smaller. I don't have a good example in front of me, but so this particular species of bird, they dig a burrow and they raise their chicks in burrows in the South Atlantic. The chicks start out pretty small. I don't have a good size reference for you. These birds, the adults weigh around 800 grams. And so when they're born, they probably start around 200 to 300 grams. So they're really small. This is very exciting. I have 4 chick samples coming up to me right now from the South Atlantic. They are on a ship, I think as we speak, making their way across the South Atlantic to South Africa. Once they get in South Africa, I have to deal with a lot of permits, and then they're going to be shipped to me to kind of figure out how much plastic is in the chicks.
All right, awesome. Let's go back to Virginia Beach one more time, see if we have another question.
Oh, we got 2.
2 questions, go for it.
Questions.
So I read about the large patches of trash in the ocean. I saw that one of them is like the size of Texas. Do you have any information on that, or like how it occurs?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm getting a PhD in oceanography, and something at the very root of oceanography is these ocean current systems, and they're called gyres. And they essentially are systems of currents that go in circles in the major ocean basin. And so there's a North Atlantic gyre, a South Atlantic gyre, North Pacific, South Pacific, and there's one in the Indian Ocean as well. And these essentially, they act as a vortex and they concentrate plastic into the center of that circular current system. The center of gyres is really calm and stable. And so the plastic, it gets kind of like spun into the center and it just stays there. This happens, the Pacific garbage patch is famous because it's really big, but this plastic accumulation in gyres occurs in every ocean, in every gyre system. I definitely encourage you to look that up because it's pretty crazy how much plastic is there. And when we say there's a patch, it's not like a solid island, like you can't walk on it. It's just like essentially the surface layer is really cloudy with a lot of bits of plastic in it. But yeah, great question.
Thank you so much for bringing up that myth, because sometimes they're referred to as trash islands, and that's a big misconception. They're not like big patches you can walk on. It's more like a soup, like a plasticky soup. And then I think you guys said you had 2. So what's the follow-up?
I was gonna ask the same question as him.
Okay, what's a good question?
Well, I guess great minds think alike. All right. Well, Anna, thank you so much. That was awesome. Thank you for sharing those statistics with us at the beginning. And thank you for that dissection. I think that really brought it home that these samples that are coming in, they're eating plastic, and it is having an effect, and it's a global problem. So thank you so much for sharing your research with us and getting hands-on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for joining me today, everyone. It was great to talk to you. Joe, you can feel free to give my email address to the classrooms. If you have any follow-up questions, or you have something that you maybe were too shy to ask, please email me. I'm a student. I'm not intimidating. I'm a student just like all of you. And so I'm happy to talk with you further about this, or show you some. I have a lot of really gross pictures of bird guts, and I'm happy to share if you're interested.
All right. Well, again, classrooms, thank you so much for the great questions. And Anna, thank you so much for an awesome presentation. So we've got a busy day today. We have 3 more events coming up today. Right now, we're live with Songbirds in Idaho. We'll have Paul Salopek, who's walking across the world, later this afternoon. And then we'll visit with Nicholas Malos, who is another ocean plastics expert, around 2 p.m. Eastern today. So lots going on. Hope to see your classrooms again. And one more time, Anna, thanks so much. I'm going to turn the microphones on, and the classrooms can say goodbye and thank you. So here we go. Nice and loud. All right. Thanks again, everyone.
Bye, everyone.